All right, so last week we showed you how to get all this started. We put our rod in here, we formed the rod in order to get this curve in here that is actually a curve this way and a curve that drops off into this corner. This week, real briefly, what I want to do before we go to break is to talk about why I chose the steel I chose to use for this. The steel I'm using is 22 gauge. Now, I really don't want to use 22 gauge. I would prefer to use like an 18 gauge or a 20 gauge, but at our home improvement center here in our area, that's a little harder to come by than this. The 22 gauge was in there, and the next size down I had from that was 16. I don't even know if you can get 20 or 18 gauge at mill supplies anymore without having to special order it in. I know that he also told me at the mill supply that a lot of guys are using 22 gauge to do sheet metal repairs on classic cars. He has a guy that comes in there, has a shop locally, and he's using 22 gauge. How do I feel about that? I have no idea. For me right now, this is okay enough. But we are using 22 gauge because of its malleability, its ability to run that curve easier, and me not have to just shower down on it. So I'm gonna pull this out of the way. We're gonna go to break, and right back to finish this thing up, hopefully today.
For 45 years, the Miller family and the dedicated staff at Autocrafters have been here helping you to restore your dream Ford. Thank you for your support. Here's to another 45 years of delivering parts for your Falcon, Fairlane, F100, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto.
First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to grind some of these spots down that I've put in here just so that it's a little better on me putting the curve in. Something is amiss. Helps to plug things in. I did plug things in. Things aren't working. Recently, in the last couple years, they've decided that we need to put GFI circuit breakers on the outlets. One of the problems I find with the GFI circuit breakers in a building like this that's outside the normal household stuff is that the dampness that can be in here in the air can actually trip that breaker, or a thunderstorm can trip that breaker and shut off your power completely to the outlets. Is it a bad thing? I don't know, but it only did it on one side and didn't do it on the other. I'm not going to talk about why that's a problem for me. All right, I'm going to go in and start leveling these out a little bit. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and make a clean spot on this steel for my ground electrode. I don't know if it makes any difference, but I always put the wire side up so that I can actually get a good solid ground on it and make sure that the ground is on the side that is contacting that electrode. Get this all the way up here. So it'll lay over. That way you can see everything. Whew, that was close. We are danger close to not having enough room, even with the cut I made, because I made the cut. I may not have enough room anyway. Problem is my crossbar is contacting the rod that I put in. Let's see if I can drop it down more. I think once I get it in there, it'll do what I need it to do. You can get these panel separators at Harbor Freight. Eastwood carries them if you don't have a Harbor Freight near you. Lots of places to pick them up. Ooh. That's a pretty cherry fit right there. What I wanted to do is put this in first before I make any kind of cut on this curve to set everything up. We've got areas in here that are a little more suspect than others. And so what I want to do is I'm going to beat this curve into position. And I think I'm going to make that, that curve here, this cut even a little deeper on this end. I'm going to probably come in here because we do have some suspect metal on that end, and just do that for this section. I'm going to go ahead and run that all the way across. Boy, those art classes really paid off. Mom and Dad, if you were alive, you'd be proud. So there's a hole here, so I'm going to leave that like it is, and I'm going to cut this back to this line right here initially. I can always take off more metal. I can't put it back on. All right, I'm going to leave it in there so I can cook my cut. If I screw it up, I can always start over because I still have my base template that I made last week. If you haven't seen that video yet, go back and pick it up. It's at the information below me here, and there's also a direct link in the description. I think that's still probably way too deep. But try it and see. Here's our moment of truth. If my idea is going to work. Now, see, I'm going to need another clamp right there because it's starting to roll that edge. Yeah, it's tending to shift on me a little bit to the over to the left, so I'm going to loosen it up. See if I can move it back around some. I get a trim hammer. The reason I'm going to a trim hammer on some of this is I want to get this to roll. And the square head hammer that I was using, the small square head body hammer's not getting in there like I want it to. Gap's grown on me a little bit. It's not too much. The problem I have right here is I have no way, unless I were to put a tack right here, and probably right here to hold it in place. This is wanting to flop around too much, and I'm getting a little bit of rise on the panel right there. So I might just do that. I might go in and tack it here and then tack it over here so it'll stay put better while I'm rolling it into place. Time to fire up the old Memorial Red Ryder welding machine. All right, I'm going to put a little tack in the corner down here. It's hard to see probably from where you guys are at. But I'm going to put a little tack down here to hold this in place. I'm going to put another one here. Oh, not holding. Okay. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and work this, continue to work this now. Yeah, that tack on the end down there did not stick. Switch them around. Crazy thing is, the 22 is light enough that I actually have a dent here now from me just holding it in place. Now, I'm going to go in now and make my cut again across here because this lay is not quite what I want, and it's starting to show buckling up in here in these two spots. And this end's going to have to be worked after I take everything back apart. So, take my Sharpie. Doesn't take much with this 22. I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to tack. Now I'm going to say this right now. What I'm doing is I'm worrying my way through this thing. It's not a super precise science. Like these tacks down here on the end, I'm going to have to regrind this area down here just so I can get this to start tacking in and laying because of where this is at. This line right here, I'm going to put tacks in on the end of this to hold it in place so that I can work everything. And the problem is I've got a dent pushing in right here. I would like to probably pop these out, and I may go ahead and do that off camera and rework this section right here to get it flat, and then come back in and just start tacking everything in. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do now. Yeah, those tacks aren't even holding, which tells me the weld is a little dirty. Now, I want to talk to you real quickly about something I'm showing you right here. This is actually where they brazed this piece of sheet steel to the pillar here in the corners, and they probably did that before they spot welded anything in, because almost everything out across here on this single large panel is spot welded. So this ran out across here. They brazed in the corners, that's what this is, and then they spot welded this to this other piece of sheet steel, which is probably most likely the upper cowl and the firewall. There are 3 pieces of sheet steel in this panel. All right, here's where we get off into the I don't know, I'm kind of guessing situations on this, because I think this happens to pretty much anybody that does this kind of fab work, especially on the poorer side of the tracks like I am, with not having a ton of the tools that some of these other places have available to them. Well, they've bought them. It's not like they're not available to me, they are. I'm going to start doing a tack on this end and work my way across with tacks. as long as this is taking me to do. I don't think there's any danger of this getting too hot. You notice I'm not doing huge, long, hard welds on this. Push down here. What I'm doing right now is I'm feeling for common depth. Okay. All right, so I have my air gun in play now, so I can start cooling this area off as soon as I get through with my weld. By the way, when you're welding, it pays to be ambidextrous with your welder. I need to probably just come on in and come high and just start working this line until I get it up to where the line is on the panel. And I'm going to probably have to do some plug fills along the way. Away we go. Only thing you can do is redo it, right? All right, I don't know if what I'm doing here is going to work. I've got a bump here from the weld underneath, and there's a couple of them a little along here, which I am going to probably have to cut or grind out and then smooth this back down into the same arc as the rest of this stuff. More worried about it from an aspect of the windshield than I am about the aspect of beauty, because your dash pad rolls right up onto it here. But I'm going to show you how I'm doing that using the Dremel tool with a little fiberglass cutoff wheel. We'll be at like 12 by the time this is done. Number 10. I have to go to the store at this rate. I'm gonna have to let that one hang in the wind for a minute because I'm gonna need to go in and grind that weld down after I get all the rest of these set. gonna be a bad spot right here for welding because of the divots. All right, I think I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go in and maybe open this up a little bit more so I can get a good tack down inside of these. I'm gonna be on either side of this high spot here because I know there's a weld there, there's a weld there. Looking back on it, I probably should have just gone underneath to do my welding. That way the round stock that's in here wouldn't have any weld on the top side, but it's just a pain to get up in here and try to grind all that on the underside and then weld it into position and hold the right spot and all the other great excuses I can come up with. Yep, I'm gonna throw in a couple of tacks. Well, in places where I can throw in a tack. And I'm gonna open that up a little bit. It's a good set right there. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut. It's like a dog on a leash line. Keep running over my own self. I'm going to cut this line back here again. Not a super hot weld, but it's enough of a weld to get me where I need to be. And yes, I like to touch things when they're hot. I don't know why. It's a little bit in. There's a dive right there. I'm going to try get my flat blade screwdriver that I can't find. Is it just me? Or does anybody else just set tools down randomly when you're walking around? All right, we are looking pretty good. I have a little bit of a concern right here. It looks like, looking at it from over on that side of the car, which you should walk around and look at the car anytime you're doing this. It looks like it dips a little bit back in here. But I think that once I knock that spot right here loose, I can go in and kind of set my depth on this and bring that down. My rod underneath has let go. So that's kind of a bummer too, because that means I can't really beat on that like I would like to. Let me go ahead and pull that out of here. So my retaining rod is no longer in there for use. I was kind of going to take that out anyway, but now it's fully out. So we are where we are. All right, folks, that's our show for this week. I'm going to come back next week and finish this whole thing up. You'll have a complete video on how to do what we did. I am not a professional at this kind of thing by any stretch of the imagination, but if I can accomplish what I've accomplished here, I know you guys out there can do it as well. I am just an enthusiast on this sort of thing. I like doing this kind of work, and this is just an example of why. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and it actually worked out really well so far. Next week may be a completely different story. But anyway, do me a favor, be kind to each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on down the road. Now, if I could just get Jackson out here to grind the other spots that need to be worked on, we would be in business, as Eddie Murphy would say. So, Jackson would quit playing disc golf and basketball. Get this whole thing done. You can see a windshield in this car and it would be sealed up. We could put seats back in it. Maybe even get a carpet set for it. That would be exceptional.